Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Talking Elite Fitness Day 2 post show from Pasadena, California, and the North America West semifinal. I'm Sean Woodland, being joined by both Tommy Marquez and Brian Friend as we wrap up the second day of competition here inside the bowels of the Pasadena Convention Center. And guys, I got to tell you, that was a fun day 2, especially late. Tommy, we'll start with you. What stood out to you here on day number 2 of competition?
Well, outside of the fact that I was standing next to Jason Kalipa, who had just shotgunned 200 milligrams of caffeine through a Jocko Go, maybe it was just the energy that everyone brought in those final 2 heats for both the men and women. With 2 athletes going side by side, they really pushed them to the brink. And it was one of those moments where everybody was kind of in sync energy-wise, and it was great.
Brian, what were you most excited about seeing on day 2?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to argue with 2, super close races at the end of the day. When everything was said and done, tiebreakers were the deciding factor for the win for both the men and the women on test 2, and it just sets up really well for the rest of the weekend.
Let's take a look back at what happened on day number 1 for the individuals. The women kicking things off with that long, grueling test number 1 that had the bike and the runner and the ski erg, and then you had that heavy sled pull in between each one of those machines. Catherine Davis-Daughter, first time we've seen her in an individual live competition in a year. She would go out and finish 8th in the event with a time of 27 minutes, 24.47 seconds. Emily Rolfe was out front for pretty much the entire third and final heat. She would win the heat, but take second in the test, 27 minutes, 24.47 seconds. The win goes to Stacy Larum with a time of 26 minutes, 51.26 seconds. Then we moved on to test number 2, and this is the one that really got the people going. There was a fantastic battle throughout the 3 rounds between Ariel Owen on the left and Alex Gazan on the right. And this one would come to a tie break. The tie break is your score in round number 1 on the burpee box jump overs. Now, Gazan was able to get 19 in round number 1. That was 1 more than Lowen, and that came into play because at the end of this thing, Lowen and Gazan were neck and neck, and they would both go on to rack up 54 reps, but it was Gazan with the tiebreak who gets the test win and those 100 points. But at the top of the overall standings right now, I don't know how many people saw this one coming, is Bethany Shadburn. She has 2 finishes inside of the top 6. And Brian, I'm pretty shocked to see her on top of the overall standings after 2 tests, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret what a healthy Bethany Shadburn can do. 2 years ago at the West Coast Classic, there was a very competitive field, and she came out on top. Since then, it's been frustration after frustration for her and for fans of hers. So this is extremely refreshing to see her come out and not have just 1, but 2 great days of competition or tests here on day 1 of competition. We spoke to Adrian Bosman this morning, and he said that he wasn't looking for someone who could do good on either one of these, but someone who could excel on both. And so far, Bethany Shadburn is that woman.
I mean, well, Tommy, this is the first time I mentioned that we have seen, Catherine Davis-Daughter in an individual in-person competition in a year, solidly inside a spot in the top 10. What did you see from her on day number 1?
Well, I saw glimpses of the old Catherine Davis-Daughter. There were times when she attacked that first test on the runner and through portions of that sled pull. We knew that the muscle-ups ultimately were going to be something to keep her eye on because it was her downfall last year at strength and depth, and traditionally has not been a good movement for her across her career. But you have to look at how she ended up after those 2 tests. She's in the top 10. She didn't have a bottom half finish in that test, and she's got a Linda test coming tomorrow that, if you remember back to 2018, she set the record in that for all women. So if she's able to at least maintain some of the things that she did well when she was at her peak under this new HWPO training, it could set herself up nicely to at least give her a little bit of a buffer going into the evening tomorrow.
Let's go over to the men's side now and take a look back at their first 2 tests. And they also started with that long test number 1. And this was all about Brent Fikowski. And you think back to that rope chipper event in 2016, one of the 4 wins that Fikowski had that year at the CrossFit Games. And he would take this test as well. Veldner was right there with Fikowski towards the end, but Veldner faded on the final sled pull. He would go on to finish in 15th place. But Brent Fikowski locks up 100 points. He was the first man off the ski erg and didn't have much trouble with that 225-pound sled, and he takes the 100 points. Then in test number 2, Veldner gets himself back inside the top 10 because he was fighting with Tetlow for first place in the 6th and final heat. Now, Tetlow was trying to chase down a test record that was set by Colton Mertens in the prior heat of 56 reps. And once again, this one comes down to a tie break, just like the women's side did, because Tetlow had more reps in round number 1 than Colton Mertens had, and that means that Tetlow picks up the test win, and he goes on to pick up the 100 points. And that certainly helps his cause as far as qualifying for the CrossFit Games. But Tommy, let's start with Brent Fikowski, who is the overall leader after day number 1. You got to be impressed with what he was able to accomplish.
Look no further than the two athletes that finished at the top of that second test, and Scott Tetlow, and they couldn't be different as far as like the type of athlete and the size and shape compared to Brent Fikowski. Yet somehow Brent managed to finish top 5 in that test. I think it's a testament overall to the fitness that he's built coming into this weekend, all the work that he's put in the offseason. Because when Brent is at his best, he defies some of those conventional wisdoms that we see based on size and shape of athletes. And I think one thing that we talked to him before coming into the weekend really paid dividends was how much time he has spent on upper body pressing and muscle up technique in particular, because we saw athletes' technique break down on those muscle ups, really putting them behind the 8 ball, and then having that strength endurance through the upper body pressing to be able to hold strong throughout all 3 intervals. Brent actually picked people off in the later rounds with some classic Fikowski pacing. So through 2 days of competition, I'm incredibly impressed for him, and this is just a vintage performance from the professor so far.
Brian, what stood out to you in those first 2 tests for the men?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's huge names out here when you got Fikowski, Medeiros, Vellner, Quant, Sager. But I see a couple of guys on this leaderboard that maybe are a little bit lesser known and had a really good first day. And the first guy I want to highlight is John Wood. If you don't know who John Wood is, he was at Wodapalooza this past year. He's actually quite unassuming looking relative to some of these superhero type bodies that we have. But man, he is really, really fit. 11th and 6th today, one of the more consistent athletes that we've seen. And I really think that consistency bodes well for him when you see so many other athletes that are having these highs and these lows. And that other guy that I want to mention is Rafael Sanson. A lot of people are high on this guy. He's young, he's up and coming. He's been training in the HWPO program for a while, and he had a few weeks to train with them out in Vermont leading into this competition. Obviously had a great performance, taking 2nd place overall on the first test, but he bounced back with a 26. So I'm excited to see he's just on the outside right now, but whether he can get a couple more big event finishes and continue to make a name for himself this weekend.
Let's go to the team side of things, where they had their 3rd and 4th tests. They have 2 more remaining on Saturday, and we will know the 10 teams that will be heading from the semifinal to the 2023 Noble CrossFit Games on Saturday night. But Misfits, Franco's Misfits, man, they had a win on Thursday night to close that competition, and they followed it up with a victory in test number 3. Invictus would finish 2nd in that test to stay close to the Misfits in the overall standings, but the Misfits put up a time of 13 minutes, 13.02 seconds. But then in test 4, Invictus came out and they just stomped the gas and they never looked back. They dominated their heat. They put up a score of 9 minutes, 45.69 seconds. I mean, this was not even close. And as a result, Invictus now, they have the overall lead. They've been nearly perfect. I mean, they never finished lower than 3rd in any of the tests so far, and they are as advertised right now. But guys, we'll start with you, Tommy. What are you looking at as far as the top story from the teams? I mean, to me, it's got to be the Misfits. We didn't know a lot about this team coming in. We knew they had individual talent, but they have been pretty impressive through 2 days of competition.
Well, they deserve credit for, giving a tough test to the top team. It feels like deja vu from last week where, the favorite comes in, wins the first test, then gets brought back down to earth by an able challenger. This time it was Franco's Misfits, who's leaning on the strength of their individual athletes and their prowess from years past. And then everything comes back around in the final test on day 2. We see why the favorites are the favorites, and then things start to separate a little bit. But either way, Franco's Misfits, for some of the name power that they have shown that they're capable and a game team, and someone I'm excited to see the rest of the weekend and moving forward into Madison as we see some new contenders emerge.
Brian, we are through now 4 of the 6 tests for the teams. What's been the biggest story in your mind in the team division here in the West?
Well, semifinals is always a twofold type of an event, and we've talked about the leaders, but the cut line is incredibly tight with only 1 day to go. In spots 9 through 12, there's only 16 points separating those teams. There's only 2 spots available for the 4 of them. So I'm excited to see who rises to the challenge tomorrow and gets those last couple spots to the games this summer.
The North America West semifinal is only one of 3 semifinals going on this weekend. Oceania and South America are also taking place, and they are just underway on day number 2 in Oceania. But before that action started, Jeremy Austin, the mayor of Australian CrossFit, got us caught up on what went on day number 1.
Thanks, Sean. Wow, well, what a first day here at the Torian Pro for 2023. Some crazy performances and test records, almost dropping every heat. In teams competition, Torian Mayhem stumbling a little in test number 1, which allowed 6-4 Army Endgame to take the win and 100 points, important for them. In test 2, Torian Mayhem bouncing back, absolutely ruthless, and finishing top spot to put them in a very good position for tomorrow and Sunday. In the female division, Caitlin Van Zyl leading from start to finish in test number 1. And Jamie Simmons, what a masterclass, untouchable in test number 2. For the men, Zach Thomas coming in as a backfill for Ricky Garrard, takes a test win and the worldwide test record in test 1.
The records keep tumbling here at the Torian Pro, and we got another. Zach Thomas, 21:54 unofficial.
And Bailey Martin doing himself a lot of favours with a win in test number 2. Moving day on day 2 of the Torian Pro 2023, but keep your eyes on James Newbury, who is currently sitting top 10. Well, Sean, plenty of action happening right here. Back to you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Looking forward to watching your call and all the action on day number 2 down there in Oceania. But let's start on the women's side. Tommy, Ellie Turner outside of the top 3 right now. What's your outlook on day number 2 at the Torian Pro?
I think it's good. I look at what's in store for this second day of competition for them. You look at Linda, she's incredibly strong. She's one of the best with the barbell out of those women at the top, at least the ones in contention. And then she gets to follow it up with an event 4-5 combo that I think could really highlight some of the things that she's worked on. Now, obviously, she's going to be stronger toward the top end of that 1-rep max snatch test, where the run hasn't factored in as much as we thought as previously before. But I think if she's able to rip those 125-pound snatches on the part 5 and then able to actually unhook the wagon a little bit on that sprint to the finish, then I think we could see her climb the ranks and maybe unbend one of the top 3 athletes going into the final day.
And Brian, over on the men's side, a wild card coming in had to be James Newbury. Coming into day number 2, he is outside of a qualifying spot. What do you like about, or what do you not like about his ability to maybe get inside the top 3 heading into the final day?
Yeah, I mean, we know James Newbury is a phenomenal athlete overall. I think the day 1 tests actually lined up pretty good for him. A long endurance test is something that's up his alley, whereas the sled in North America has really proven to be a problem. It seems like it's moving across the competition floor more easily in Australia, so not too surprised that he had a decent finish there. And then a body weight test with a little bit of ruck on the back. Gymnastics is going to be something that I'm not too worried about for him. Day 2, like Tommy said, there's a lot of weightlifting. And with the type of training that he's been doing and maybe not as committed to training for this type of an environment as some of his competitors, I need to see how he handles Linda. I need to see how he handles a heavy snatch. If he does okay on those, then we can talk about his chances. But until I see that, I'm not so sure.
Let's turn our attention to Copa Sur and what's going on in South America. And there are some surprises down there, in the men, the women, and in the teams division. And we'll focus on the men to start. And Tommy Guimayeros, after 2 tests, is outside of the top 2. He's close. I think he's 4 spots away. But what does he need to do now moving forward in order to get himself in a qualifying spot?
I think he just has to be Guy, and the Guy that we've used to seeing in competition when it comes to the skills that he excels at relative to the field. Basically take what Brian said about James Newbury and flip it upside down, because all of that weightlifting is going to have Guy licking his chops. I mean, he's going to move the barbell and let it be just fine with that test, and then he's going to come back, and depending on if he's able to showcase some of the same top end strength despite working on other aspects, he's going to win the snatch event. And remember, he was the top athlete on the men's side with that sprint at the games at 500 meters, so he's going to be able to potentially walk away with 200 points in the 4-5 combo, and I think that should be enough to put him within striking distance, if not move him at least into a qualifying spot going into Sunday.
Brian, simple question for you, but I'm sure this has a complex answer. What's going on the women's side of things down there?
Yeah, I mean, all of the women that we had highlighted as having the most likely chance to take one of these 2 spots, or both of these spots, are nowhere to be seen in terms of the top 4. And the 2 women that are in the qualifying spots right now are women that were just kind of in that next tier for me. Andrea Pinheiro, obviously is the leader here after day one. And I actually got a chance to talk to Larissa Kuhn a couple days ago over here in Pasadena, and she said that Andrea is really set up well for these tests. So Larissa, obviously being Brazilian herself, knows the athletes down there super well, and her insight seems to be holding true so far. And we did mention Alexia Williams in the pregame show. She's very young. She's Argentinian, but she lives and trains in Spain with the training culture. She also competed at Wodapalooza, so she got a little bit of high-level competition experience under her belt, and it seems like it's paying off. Obviously, there's a lot of competition to go, but right now, these races in South America are unexpected, and that leads to a lot of drama and excitement.
And that's what makes this time of year so exciting. Guys, thanks so much for taking the time to hop on here. Let's take a look at what is on tap now for the final 2 days of competition in the semifinals. Of course, things a little different here in North America as the teams are going to wrap up on Saturday, and we will know the 10 that are heading to the 2023 Noble CrossFit Games. The individuals will have things to themselves on Sunday, and then down in Torium Pro and also Copa Sur, we're going to have team test 3, individual test 3, and then team test 4, and then those back-to-back tests for the individuals in 4 and 5. We're going to have a wrap-up show these next 2 nights. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk about what's going to take place here over these next 2 days. We have great coverage going on, courtesy of Lauren Khalil on our Instagram page. So if you're not following us on Instagram, you want to do that. Lauren's putting up some great content throughout the day that will keep you updated on everything going on here in North America. And we'll also be keeping you posted on the other 2 semifinals. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. For Tommy Marquez and Brian Friend, I'm Sean Woodland, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.